The next important factor of consumer behavior under psychological is learning. Man by nature, as long as he lives, continues to learn from various sources, from the nature, from books, from people, from experiences. He continues to learn throughout his life. But how he behaves is again a learning which is from various sources. What to buy, which product to buy, when to buy, how to buy. These are all the things which he has learned right from his childhood. Now, why a marketer should understand how a consumer learns is a very important question. Because the marketers always teach the consumers. Since a marketer has to teach, the marketer should understand how a consumer learns. Because the marketer has to teach what product to buy, why he should buy, where from he can buy, how to use, how to maintain, how to dispose, how his product is better than the competitors. He wants to teach. So, he must understand the learning process of the consumer. Now, let us understand what is consumer learning. The consumer learning is a process by which individuals acquire the purchase and consumption knowledge and experience that they apply to the future related behavior. So, here when you look, it is the learning is knowledge and also it is a process. Now, how a consumer learns? The learning process is both intentional and incidental. So, the learning process, intentional learning acquired as a result of careful search for information. It is also incidental because learning is acquired many times by accident or without much effort. So, the consumer learns from both the intentional and incidental ways. Now, what are the elements of learning of the consumer? Motivation, cues, response and reinforcement. Now, the marketer has to understand that the consumer first will learn anything because of the motivations. He do not learn without any motivation. So, the marketer has to tell what is there for him in his ad or in his product. By understanding the need, they have to tell. If I tell a student that by learning this chapter, he is going to get a 20-mark question out of 100 marks, he will be motivated to learn. So, if the marketer tells by buying the product, he is going to have an esteem, then the customer will learn that yes, if I buy this brand or product, I will get an esteem and he buys. So, the learning has happened because of motivation. Now, the cues. It is the duty of the marketer himself that to give cues as to how to learn, what to learn and the result. Then only the consumer would learn. Out of this, why consumer or anybody learns after learning there is a behavioral change that happens. So he responds. As I said, if you buy this product, you are going to get esteem. He will buy. That is the response. From the learning, that is what the response comes. There is an important called as reinforcement. If that esteem don't come, or if people don't appreciate, next time he will not learn. Because his learning is, if you do this, it is not going to get you the same result what you are expecting as per the cues and motivation. So he will not learn. So the reinforcement has to be there continuously. Now having understood the definition of learning, important elements of learning, let us understand what are the learning theories. Broadly, there are two learning theories. The first is called as behavioral. The second one is called as cognitive. Consumers learn through these theories. The behavioral theory or theories based on the premise that learning takes place as the result of observable responses to external stimuli. These are also known as stimuli response theories. There is another theory which takes learning as a cognitive process. A theory of learning based on mental information processing, often in response to problem solving. This is the second theory, that is the cognitive theory. Whatever, as we have discussed, the reinforcement, either positive or negative outcome that influences the likelihood that a specific behavior will be repeated in the future in response to a particular cue or stimulus. So either of the theories, if it results in what they want to get, if it is there, then they will further learn. So the next, let us discuss about the behavioral learning theories. Though we don't dwell in detail, there are three behavioral learning theories. That is, the first one is called as the classical conditioning. The second is instrumental conditioning. The third one is called as modeling or observation learning. Now let us discuss what is these three theories talk about. The classical conditioning theory says it is a behavioral learning theory, according to which a stimulus is paired with another stimulus that elicits a known response that serves in turn to produce the same response when used alone. There are three basic components here involved: the repetition, stimulus generalization, and stimulus discrimination are to be understood as part of the classical conditioning. Then the instrumental or operant conditioning is a behavioral theory of learning based on a trial and error process. With habits forced as the result of positive experiences, we get reinforcement, and resulting from certain responses or behavior. This theory is propounded by Skinner. In most of the cases, we go by trial and error. Suppose we go to the shop when we want to buy a trouser for us. We look at various trousers which would fit us. So, finally the brand which fits us perfectly, we will buy that. So, here the learning has happened through the trial and error process. Then the concept of modeling or the observational thing would talk that most of the learning would come through the modeling or observation. Our learning is mostly through the modeling or observation. We look at normally the models that with both the classical conditioning and instrumental conditioning, the reinforcement is what makes them to learn further or to shun it there. If the reinforcement is positive, that is the positive outcomes that strengthen the likelihood of a specific response. For example, an ad showing a beautiful hair as a reinforcement to buy shampoo, people would buy. The negative reinforcement is unpleasant or negative outcomes that serve to encourage a specific behavior. An ad showing again wrinkled skin as reinforcement to buy skin cream. Here it is negative reinforcement, again making them to learn that this cream would make them to look good or overcome their wrinkled skin. Now coming to the next, that is observational learning. It is a process by which individuals observe the behavior of others and consequences of such behavior, also known as modeling or vicarious learning. So here the consumers will form a model by observing. Suppose if somebody jumps from say 20 feet and breaks his leg, the consumer would have a model that if anybody who jumps from similar conditions from 20 feet will break his legs. So his learning is based on the modeling or observational learning. Then coming to the cognitive theory, it holds that the kind of learning most characteristic of human beings is problem solving. This theory says always people do not know or do not learn through accidental or by observing others. They deliberately learn to solve a problem, which enables individuals to gain some control over their environment. So the learning would enable them to gain control over their environment. This is what people would be taking as a challenge and enjoy learning. So the information processing is what is part of the cognitive learning. A cognitive theory of human learning patterned after computer information processing. This information processing and cognitive learning is patterned after computer information processing that focuses on how information is stored in human memory and how it is retrieved. So this model broadly follows the computer, how it stores its memory. The next in the cognitive theory continuation is involvement theory. The involvement theory is very important for learning through cognitive process. This theory says the consumer learning that consumers engage in a range of information processing activity from extensive to limited problem solving depending on the relevance of the purchase. The consumer's involvement in terms of the product gives them the knowledge or learning. If somebody is limited problem solving, he will get reasonably involved. If it is a routine purchase, routine behavior, the involvement will be limited, almost less. If it is extensive problem solving, his involvement will be more and his learning also will be more. This is what this involvement theory as part of the cognitive tells us. So, any marketer, when he is giving information for making his consumer to learn, has to understand in terms of involvement where his consumer is. In continuation of the cognitive theory, there is another theory which talks about split brain theory. This is split brain theory. Our brain is split into two hemispheres. One is the left brain, another is the right brain. This theory on information processing says the left brain is responsible for cognitive activities, the reading, speaking and attributional information. The right brain is non-verbal, pictorial, timeless and holistic information. This is more artistic and this is more information. So, the balance would make a learning complete. So, based on this theory, there are a lot of theories that talk about how consumers are to be persuaded. So, once you understand that the consumer has two brains, one is the left and one is right, and then approaching the consumer's learning would make him to learn completely. Now, let us understand the central and peripheral routes to persuasion. This theory says that highly involved consumers are best reached through ads that focus on specific attributes of the product. That is the central route. The highly involved consumers, because of the extensive problem solving, want a lot of information, particularly on the attributes of the product. So, give them what they want. That is the central route, can be attracted through that. And the consumers who are looking at peripheral, who go by the advertisements, models, for them give them good advertisements, particularly those with less resources and the lower income groups with less education and less exposure, they normally go by the advertisements. So, they are called as the peripheral routes. You have to persuade them through peripheral routes. The information that you give them for learning is more of pictures, advertisements, models, etc. Then the last concept of the learning is through elaboration likelihood model. This is called as ELM. This is a theory that suggests that a person's level of involvement during message processing is a critical factor in determining which route to persuasion is likely to be effective. So, we have to understand the person's level of involvement during message processing. It is a critical factor in determining which route to persuasion is likely to be effective. So, the ELM, the elaborative likelihood model, talks basically about the involvement, and if the consumer is highly involved, you have to approach through central route. The elaboration likelihood model is based on the involvement of the consumer. So, if the consumer is highly involved, you have to approach through the central root. If the consumer is low involved because of limited problems or it is a routine behavior, you have to follow the peripheral route. In the central route, the messages, arguments, influences, attitudes are given to the consumer so that he will learn completely about the attributes of the product and he gets convinced. Whereas, in the low involvement category of learners, the peripheral route is followed. That is, by giving the cues, by giving the ads, by giving the models, by extending influence through the models and advertisements and also through attitudes, which are changed again by through the models and advertisements. So, the elaboration likelihood model says depending upon the involvement, you either follow a high or low involvement, go for central route or peripheral route depending upon the involvement. However, the learning should not be restricted to these situations. The consumer can switch or he may be in both the cases. So, the ideal not to miss in teaching is to follow both central route and also the peripheral route, so that the consumer is given the entire learning in terms of giving him the information, messages, arguments about the product, brand, comparisons, and also by making good visuals, good advertisement to show the product nicely, and also if the brand ambassador is also good who talks about positively, then it reinforces the learning from the central route. Even for the peripheral route learners, if there is enough information which he may or may not take, but whenever he wants, if it is there, his learning would be complete. So, understanding the learning and teaching accordingly would help the marketers in hitting the consumers in straight away telling him about his product, brand and making him to buy the brand. The next factor in consumer behavior that we are going to study is beliefs and attitude. Many times we either take a product or a service or a person based on our beliefs or attitudes. So, either we reject or we take the products or brands etc. based on our beliefs, which is an accumulation of various experiences and our attitudes. So, let us discuss what is an attitude. An attitude is a learned predisposition to behave in a consistently favorable or unfavorable manner with respect to a given object. So, if we look at the definition, there are certain aspects that are to be understood in attitude. The attitude normally is towards an object. We form an attitude towards person, towards a place, towards a store, towards a product, towards a brand, etc. So, whatever we exhibit or show attitudes towards an object. The second point is attitudes are learned predisposition. It is based on the learning and it is a learned predisposition. We have already that, whether the store is good or whether the store is bad, or the product is good or product is bad. The major thing that has to be understood is attitudes have consistency. That means the attitudes normally are relatively permanent. They do not change immediately. So, they are relatively enduring and they are consistent. And finally, the attitude occurs within a situation. So, we have to understand that it works with a situation. Say for example, a particular person may be averse, his attitude towards a particular store in the normal course is negative, unfavorable. But the same store may be liked for its discounting. When it goes on sale, this store may be the best one to give the best product at the best possible discount. So, when the situation has changed, the attitude changes. So, while understanding what is an attitude, one has to understand that it is either favorable or unfavorable, or it could be, but normally extremely favorable or reasonably favorable, then extremely negative or reasonably negative, like that, but it works at the two, either favorable or unfavorable. So, now let us understand the next one is how and what constitutes an attitude, how it is formed. There are various models that talk about attitudes and its formation, but the major model that talks about the attitudes is called as the tri-component attitude model. So, the tri-components attitude model says there are three components that are part of attitude. The first is cognitive, affective and conative. These three would form the attitude. So, let us understand one by one. So, the three components of attitude in tri-component attitude model are cognitive, affective and conative. Let us understand what is cognitive, what is affective and what is conative. The knowledge and perception that are acquired by a combination of direct experience with the attitude object and related information from various sources. So, here it is cognitive, that is why it is a mental process which is realistic. So, the knowledge and perceptions that are acquired by a combination of direct experience with the attitude object and related information from various sources. This is what is one of the major reason for formation of attitude. So, the direct experience and information from other sources. So, a marketer has to manage the information from other sources also positively, so as to form a positive attitude. The second reason for formation of attitude is affective component. A consumer's emotions or feelings about a particular product or brand. Say for example, from the cognitive, let us take a store, XYZ store. It has very good merchandise, it has very good brand name, it has very good ambience, everything is good. So, the attitude is from the cognitive component, it is good. But a customer has gone there, he might have been neglected, or the salesperson might have misbehaved, or whatever, his feelings and emotions were affected. So, the consumer will have a negative attitudes towards that XYZ store. It is because from the cognitive point of view, it is a very good store. All the attributes are very good. But what has made him to say it is not a good store is because of the affective component. The third one is called as conative. Now, what is conative? The likelihood or tendency that an individual will undertake a specific action or behave in a particular way with respect to the attitude object. So, it is the actual behavior that is what decides. Many times people may say this is good, but when it comes to actual buying, they may not buy. So, the willingness to buy or the actual buying says that they have positive attitude. That is the reason why many theorists say many times when you are measuring the attitude, normally the best way of understanding about the success of a brand or product is measuring the attitude. So, in that, one of the major thing in consumer research that is to be measured is conative. In terms of the attitude towards the object, people may have positive, but what exactly is relevant for a marketer is the conative behavior of purchasing. See, when you ask about the attitude towards the Mercedes-Benz or BMW, many would say that they want to buy. It is a good brand. But when it comes to actually buying, how many would actually buy? So, the attitude in terms of the cognitive and affective is good, but in terms of the conative, when it comes to actual buying behavior, it may not reflect their attitude. So, the retailers or the product or brand managers must look at the actual behavior. So, this word reflects the attitude, that is what the theory of tri-component attitude model says. Now, when we understand the attitude formation, majorly many products or brands or stores are built through advertisement. So, we have to look at what is the effect of the advertisement on the attitude. So, when a consumer is exposed to an ad, two things happen. Even you can visualize when you see the advertisement, there is a cognitive aspect, there is an affective aspect. When you look at the advertisement models and also the background, you will get a good feeling. That is what is the feeling, affective. And when you look at again the ad, you will also get some judgments that okay, this information is good, this car is good, or there is a Japanese company, so on and so forth. You will get the cognitive aspects, informative aspect. So, the exposure to an ad will give both an affective as well as cognitive. These will lead to forming of belief about the brand, and parallelly an attitude towards the ad is also formed. So, when there is a belief about the brand that happens and attitude toward the ad happens, they both will lead to attitude towards the brand or product itself. Hence, the advantage of a good advertisement. Once an advertisement is good, that is why it reflects on the attitude towards the brand itself. If the advertisement is bad, that is reflected on the product or brand, and consumer thinks that the product or brand is also bad. That is why they are given a bad advertisement. Hence, a marketer has to be very careful when they are making an ad. And if they want to make positive attitude towards their product, the both affective and cognitive aspects are to be carefully planned. So, this is how the attitude towards the ad model educates a marketer. Now, next, the commonsensical question that okay, the theory says so many things, but in general in the marketing scenario, how attitudes are formed. So, for them, what is an attitude? A shift from having no attitude towards a given object to having some attitude is attitude formation. Now, the issues that are there in attitude formation in general, or they are learned, and how it is learned we will see. And there are sources of influence which will help in attitude formation, and even the personality also many times have an impact on attitude formation. Now, when it comes to attitudes learning, attitudes are formed through association with a favorable brand name or through repeated satisfaction of that brand name. Now, that is why an unconditioned stimulus will convert into conditioned stimulus when it comes to brand extension. Say for example, we are very happy with XYZ brand, or say for example, Lee. When it launches Lee Women or Lee Kids, naturally the consumer's attitude towards the Lee Kids or Lee Women is also positive because of previous learning. Sometimes attitudes follow the purchase and consumption of the product. That is why if the brand want to establish a very favorable attitude, it has to give all the attributes correctly. Trial purchase of new brands and product categories in which they have little personal involvement also would help in forming the attitudes. Consumers also seek to solve a problem or satisfy a need. They form an attitude about the product on the basis of information and own cognition. When it comes to the source of influence, the personal experience of trying and evaluating also helps in forming the attitude. And the major influence in attitude formation is family and friends, coupled with values and beliefs they have on the brand. The next process of attitude forming is because of direct marketing and mass media. When during the direct marketing, the sources would explain why and the advantage of the feature, so that they get direct information to assess and form an attitude. Even the mass media helps in forming the attitude, particularly the emotional appeal in print ads are most effective with consumers who lack product experience. Then the personality factors also help in attitude formation. There are some who are in high need of cognition. So, for them positive attitude would form in response to ads that are rich in product related information. If you give good product related information, the high need for cognition people will form a positive attitude. And when it comes to low need for cognition people, they will form positive attitude in response to ads that feature an attractive model. Now, having understood the attitude and how it forms, we have to look from the marketing point of view, consumer behavior point of view, is having learnt we should apply to change the attitude. Though attitudes are difficult, they are consistent, still the retailers, if at all, or they have any attitude problems with their consumers, would use the same attitude learning model, that is tri-component attitude model, and other ways of learning attitudes to change the attitudes. So, they broadly follow the following strategies. By changing the basic motivational function, the attitudes are changed. Why people buy? Why they have formed an attitude? Because they had a problem with the basic motivational function. So, if you change those basic motivational functions, there is a chance of forming a positive attitude. Then associating the product with an admired group or event. That is the reason why many brands or products associate with good environmental friendly or voluntary organizations to build a positive image. They also associate themselves with certain events or causes, so that there is a attitude that this company must be positive. That is why they are associating with the positive events. Then resolving two conflicting attitudes. Many times the attitudes might be because of there is a conflicting attitudes. Say for example, when you eat fried products, because of that cholesterol will increase and that leads to the heart attacks or many problems. So, why fried products will increase the cholesterol when the oil which you are using is not good? So, if you use good oils or you use modern methods which would avoid the extra calories, then consumer is likely to have a positive attitude towards the product or the brand. Then altering components of multi-attribute model. Previously, some might have not considered particular attributes. So, when we are evaluating about the apparel, the normal attributes are design, styles, features, colors, etc. But never we have considered technology as an attribute. So, suppose a company which is innovative, but it has not been able to get that favorable attitude, might add that as an attribute in the evaluation process and can get a favorable attitude. The last is changing beliefs about competitor brands. Normally, this is done by comparative advertising, though in many countries it is banned and ethically also many question, but still sometimes in order to change the attitude, the product or brand owners would look at changing beliefs about competitors' brands to change the attitude. So, this is how the marketers will look at understanding attitude to change the attitude if it requires to benefit the overall organization. Hence, the importance of the beliefs, understanding the beliefs and attitudes of the consumers in consumer behavior.